Okay, so we're going to be factoring quadratics, what we have here. Here's our quadratic. There's a couple things I want you guys to note. First of all, this is a trinomial. There are three major terms in it. And it is a quadratic because the variable with the highest power is to the power of 2. Okay? Now, factoring a quadratic is the opposite of expanding and simplifying. So I'm going to write in what this normally looks like. Okay? Here's our normal trinomial. And the way they denote everything is ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay? So, if you look in this question, our a would be the coefficient in front of the x squared, our b would be the coefficient in front of the x, and our c would be the constant term at the end. Okay? So these are our terms. C is 5, b is 6. What is a? 1. Good. Important that you guys recognize that number is just 1. Okay? This is standard form. We'll put that on the side. So right here, this is standard. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking standard form and putting it into, anyone know what form? As I write it? Factored form, right? Hence factoring. So our factored form looks like this. Put it all together here. Okay. A's on the outside, and then they usually denote these as an R and an S. Okay? So this is our factored form. Now, what I want you guys to realize is the only two letters that are the same are A. And the reason they're the same is because we can take a common factor out. Okay? So, in other words, the very first step to factoring should always be common factoring, which we just went over. Okay? So we always look for a common factor first. If there isn't a common factor, then we get into our different styles of factoring this question so that it looks like essentially just two brackets. So we look here, 1, 6, and 5. Is there a common factor there? No. The only number I can take out is 1, which won't change anything. Okay? So don't worry about that common factor for now. What we're going to do is get into our factoring. When we're factoring, what we do is we find the factors of our first term of the trinomial. So this is 1x squared. So a factor of this is essentially two numbers that are multiplied to give us that. What two numbers can we multiply to get 1? 1x and 1x. Okay? So I set them up like this, and just to make things easier, I'm even going to put a little column around them. Okay? No, that's not what I wanted. This could be a disaster. Oh, no, they're going to work. Okay. The other thing we look for is the last term, the constant. We look for the two factors of the constant, or sometimes there's several factors. What are factors of 5? Just 5 and 1. That's all we get. Okay. Now, the reason I'm putting them into columns here is because I want you guys to recognize that these columns, okay, have to be used in pairing. So this is a very simple question, but we'll get into more difficult ones, okay? This pairing here is very important. I'm going to move this down so we have a little more room. Okay? So we're working with this here. The reason we've set these up is because we're going to be multiplying the red columns by the green columns. Now, right now, there's only one of each. But as we get into different questions, there's going to be more than one. And what essentially we're looking for is we're going to be looking for factors or products that are going to add up to our B term. What's our B term in this case? Yeah, not just 6, but we're going to say 6x. Okay? So we're looking for products that add to that. What I mean by that is I take 1 and I multiply it by 5. What is 1x times 5? 5x. And what is 1x times 1? Do they add up to 6x? Perfect. So we know that these will be the factors of this. Now, there's only one option, so obviously there's tougher questions in this. But the way we set this up is we multiply the two of them by each other, and this is our test. Well, this becomes 5x, this becomes 1x, and when I add them, I get 6x. Perfect, it works. So when I go to put this into our factored form, I'm going to set up two brackets. The numbers from the red column will be the first terms in each bracket, and the numbers from the green column will be the second terms in each bracket. Okay? Now, there is a way to specifically set this up. Normally, because I multiplied the 1x times the 5, they have to go in opposite brackets. Okay? So I'll put the 1x here and the positive 5 in the other bracket. And then for the other one, well, we multiplied 1x times 1. So I put the 1x in one bracket and the positive 1 in the other. Okay? Now, you might have noticed that since these are both the same, we ended up with a 1x as the first term in each. That's fine. But as we get into harder questions, that rule is important because they have to go into opposite brackets. So let's just rewrite this in black so it looks a little more like a final answer. 1x can be written as just x plus 1. And the other one is x plus 5. This is our factored form, just like what we had above here. Okay? So we went about factoring that question. We went through all those steps, we looked for our columns, and that's what we got. Let's do quickly a tougher example here. Okay? We'll quickly find a tougher example, and I'm going to go through it much quicker. So since you've seen the process, let's say this is example 2. X squared plus 6x plus 8. Okay? Very first step is we find the factors of the first term. What are factors of 1x squared? 1x and 1x. Very simple. Factors of 8, which is our constant, our last term. And 2 and 4. Okay? Like we said, we set them up into our columns, so I'll quickly do that. Here's our first column. And then we're going to have 2 columns for the second terms. So what that means is I can only use one pairing. That's why I've set them up to column. I either use 8 and 1 or I use 4 and 2. We know that their products are going to have to add to what term? 6x, the middle term. So quickly looking at this, we'll do trial and error method. I'm sure many of you can see it already. We'll do 1 by 1 and 1 by 8. 1x and 8x is what we get. Do those add up to 6x? No, they don't. So they don't work. Okay? So let's try the next one. 1 times 2 and 1 times 4 gives us 2x and 4x. Do they work? Yes. Yes, they work. Okay? So that means those are the pairings we're going to use. We get 2x and 4x. So the numbers in the columns are what are important for setting it up in our factored form. So we go to our factored form. The first numbers in each column are the red ones. So we don't need to technically include the 1, so we put x and x. And again, because they're the same term, it doesn't matter which one we put them in. So positive 2 and positive 4. That's our factored form. The more you practice this, it's going to become much easier for you, and you'll be able to do it much quicker, as you noticed.